The realities of living in Australia. Being born in Australia might sound like a dream to outsiders, beaches, barbecues, and cuddly koalas, but for locals, the reality is far less glamorous. For starters, everything in Australia wants to kill you. Spiders the size of dinner plates, snakes that can kill you in minutes, and swooping magpies that treat cyclists like mortal enemies are just the beginning. Oh, and don't forget the jellyfish, sharks, crocodiles, and even plants. Yes, plants, like the jimpy jimpy tree that causes excruciating pain if you brush against it. Basically, every walk in nature feels like a game of, will I survive today? The cost of living is another nightmare, especially in big cities like Sydney and Melbourne. Rent prices are astronomical, with people paying thousands of dollars per month for apartments that aren't even that nice. Housing affordability is so bad that buying a home feels like a distant dream for most young people. Property investors have scooped up so much real estate that locals are getting priced out of their own cities. If you're thinking of eating out, prepare to drop half your paycheck for a meal. Want a coffee? That'll be $5. Want a pint of beer? That's $10.12. Everyday groceries like fresh fruit and vegetables can cost a fortune, especially in remote areas where produce has to be flown in like luxury imports. The wildlife isn't just outside, it's in your house too. Spiders love hanging out in bathrooms, cockroaches throw surprise parties in your kitchen, and if you live in Queensland, you'll probably encounter a gecko chilling on your ceiling. Everyone has that story of finding a giant huntsman spider on the wall and debating whether to fight it or just burn the whole house down. Mosquitoes are relentless in summer and forget leaving food out. The ants will organize an entire military campaign to invade your kitchen. The climate is wild. Summers are so hot that roads literally melt, bushfires rage out of control, and breathing outside feels like inhaling straight from an oven. Heat waves last for weeks, and if you're in rural areas, water shortages are a real issue. Then, as if to balance things out, floods and storms come crashing in with biblical intensity. Cyclones destroy coastal towns, and one minute it's perfect beach weather, and the next, your backyard has turned into a swamp. Australia's weather basically flips between fire and water with very little warning. Work-life balance is supposedly great in Australia, but that depends on your industry. While Australians love the idea of knocking off early for a beer, the truth is many people are stuck in the classic 9-to-5 grind. But if you work in construction, hospitality, or any casual labor job, expect casual contracts that aren't casual at all. No paid sick leave, no paid holidays, and the constant threat of being fired without notice. Australians are taught to work hard, play hard, but for many it feels more like work hard, stress harder. Transport is hit or miss. If you live in Sydney, you'll deal with constant train delays, overcrowded buses, and random track work on weekends that leaves you stranded. The train system is often a joke, and public transport in rural areas is nearly non-existent, forcing people to buy cars just to get around. Speaking of cars, Australian fuel prices are ridiculously high, and every highway feels like a speed trap with sneaky hidden speed cameras ready to fine you for going 3 kilometers per h over the limit. Internet speeds are embarrassingly slow for a so-called developed country. While other nations have gigabit fibre, Australians are stuck with the National Broadband Network, NBN, which took over a decade to build and is already outdated. The internet is so slow and patchy that Aussies often joke they're living in a third-world internet country. Gamers know the pain of ping spikes, streamers endure buffering, and video calls feel like communicating through a time machine. Upload speeds, forget about it. Healthcare is technically good thanks to Medicare, but waiting times for specialists can be ridiculous. Need to see a dentist or mental health professional? You'll either pay a fortune or wait months for an appointment. Public hospitals are fine for emergencies, but if you need non-urgent surgery, you might be waiting for a year. Australians love to brag about free healthcare, but the reality is that most people end up paying for private health insurance just to avoid the insane wait times. And don't even think about needing an ambulance. You'll be hit with a bill so large, you'll wonder if walking to the hospital with a broken leg would have been a better idea. Education is a double-edged sword. Public schools are free, but if you want your kid in a good school, you're either moving to a richer suburb or paying thousands in private school fees. Australian universities aren't free either. Students graduate with tens of thousands of dollars in debt, called HECS debt, and while repayments are income-based, the debt hangs over you for years like a silent curse. And if you're an international student, good luck, you'll pay double or triple the fees of a local student for the same degree. Australia's cultural identity is confusing. People argue over what it means to be Australian. Is it about mateship and laid-back beach vibes, or is it about nationalism, BBQs, and calling people mate every 5 minutes? On one hand, Australians pride themselves on being chill, but on the other, tall poppy syndrome is real. If you're too successful, people will find a way to cut you down. Racism is also an ongoing issue, especially toward Indigenous Australians and immigrants from Asia and Africa. Despite claiming to be a multicultural nation, racial profiling, xenophobia, and debates about asylum seekers are a constant part of Australian politics. Speaking of politics, Australian politicians are a meme in themselves. Prime ministers don't seem to last more than a year or two before their own party stabs them in the back. Leadership spills happen so often that people joke about needing a scoreboard to keep up. Climate change debates are particularly embarrassing, with the government simultaneously promising to reduce carbon emissions while approving new coal mines. Aussies have seen so much political chaos that most people just roll their eyes and go back to the beach. Drinking culture is intense. Australians drink like fish, and binge drinking is seen as a rite of passage. Weekend nights are filled with pub crawls, and it's almost socially unacceptable to just have one beer. Alcohol is expensive thanks to Australia's high taxes, but that doesn't stop people from drinking like it's the end of the world. Go to any festival, beach party, or music event, and you'll see people preloading on drinks, because buying drinks inside the event is financially ruinous. Oh, and if you think you're safe from hangovers the next morning, guess what? It's probably 40 degrees Celsius outside and you have no air conditioning. Enjoy. Lastly, the great Australian dream of home ownership is basically dead. Housing prices have skyrocketed, especially in cities like Sydney, where even a rundown shack costs millions. Young people have resigned themselves to the rent-forever lifestyle, with memes about avocado toast being the reason millennials can't afford a house. Spoiler, it's not the avocado toast. The government occasionally promises schemes to help first-time home buyers, but most people see it as window dressing that doesn't actually address the root issue. Houses are too expensive, and wages aren't keeping up. But for all of its flaws, Australians still have a fierce love for their country. They'll complain about the spiders, snakes, politicians, and prices, but at the end of the day, they still say, "Yeah, but the beaches are pretty good, aye?" Australia is a country where people laugh at their own misfortune, where complaining is a national pastime, and where no one takes themselves too seriously, unless you criticize Vegemite, in which case, prepare for war. For every complaint about load-shedding Wi-Fi and real estate prices, there's a sunset over Bondi Beach or a barbecue with mates that makes it all feel worth it, until the magpies swoop